to Book to Bestseller TV. This is Lisa Despain, and today I'm here with Kelly Lutman. Kelly is a best-selling author, a nutritional consultant, and founder of Pursue Wellness. A certified health coach, Kelly uses functional medicine principles to help her clients put disease into remission without the use of drugs. She meets her clients where they are in life, providing individualized guidance and nutritional support to resolve the root causes of symptoms and enable the body to heal. Kelly's book is From Diet to Edit, Discover Freedom and a New Approach to Food. So Kelly, thank you for being with me here today. I love talking about nutrition. It's one of my personal favorite topics to talk about. And I love also the approach that you have in your book, From Diet to Edit. Can you explain to us where that concept came from?
Well, I'm not sure where the original visualization of it was. Perhaps it was a dream, or maybe looking at my grandkids' magnetic letters on the refrigerator. But I have always struggled, in decades of my life with diets. You do diets and they don't work, and then you do diets again. And if it worked, why do you have to keep doing them over and over again? And so I didn't believe that diet worked. But one day I saw, hey, if you move that E to the front from the word diet, you get edit. And in the way I've worked with my clients for years, instead of telling them, no, you can't, because that's frustrating and that tends to make you want to all the more, I say, let's shift our approach, edit your choices, edit your approach. And that's really what led to the book itself.
That's great. So I've heard of the concept of elimination diets where you take certain things out and you figure out, is this working for me? Is this not working for me? Is this kind of the same idea?
It's a similar idea, but From Diet to Edit is really on an even simpler basis. I'm not really talking about removing the food sensitivities and things like that. I'm talking about swapping in more color. If you look at the average meal you buy in a fast food restaurant, what color is it? It's mostly brown, unless you use mustard and ketchup for adding some color. And that's not lively. It's not nutritious. It doesn't represent a lot of nutrient. And so I'm talking about adding in those nutrients, eating the color of the rainbow, but then also editing your approach, because our typical way of eating is grab something on the way out the door in the morning and eat it as you're in the car, maybe even putting your makeup on. I have actually seen people put makeup on in the car while they're driving. It's scary. But we get everything on the run and we eat it real quick, or we eat at our desks and we're really not paying attention to what we're doing. And in the process, you mindlessly eat more than you need, or you're really not properly chewing for digestion. And a lot of us don't realize that chewing is the only aspect of digestion that we have control over. You can choose how much you chew, but once you've chewed and swallowed, you can't control what's happening in the rest of the digestive system. So chewing is part of what I call eating hygiene, and it's really important.
Oh gosh, that's interesting. So it almost sounds more like a crowding out of things we shouldn't be eating because we're eating the things we should and doing so more mindfully. Would that be a good kind of overview?
That would be part of it, in crowding out the more negative things to add in new things, but just editing your pace, the rhythm at which you eat throughout the day, or the portions you eat, because supersizing is not really the best way to approach. Or maybe you're editing the balance of the foods and the macronutrients on your plate. That can make a difference as well. I heard a lecture by a doctor who works primarily with diabetic patients, who said if you eat the protein in your food first, it keys your body to use what's already stored in the body to digest that protein. Whereas if you start with eating carbs, think of your typical appetizer at a restaurant, chips and salsa or bread or something like that. When you start a meal with the carbs, your body is quickly going into blood sugar and using blood sugar, and it's actually designed or taking you more along the route of storing fat instead of using your stores to digest. So simply changing the pattern at which you eat your food can make a big difference in your body.
Yeah, no, you don't think about that often.
No.
So what would be the benefit, or maybe would it make sense to eat salad first and then move to a protein, or would it be smarter to do protein first and then salad, or would it matter in that case?
I Personally, I tend to eat my protein or start with my protein, at least a good portion of it before I go into the vegetables. And in my family, we tend to eat the salad last
Mm.
instead of first. And just making an effort. So we've eaten protein and vegetables mostly, and then we fill a plate with salad to finish the meal off. And as you have to chew salad a bit to get
Right.
it working through, and it slows down, and then you feel full faster.
I have a long-standing joke that I'll eat a salad and I'm just as hungry when I'm done as when I started, except I'm
Well,
exhausted.
what's in your salad, maybe? Maybe you need to add some more variety or put some protein. You can do protein either with black beans or chickpeas, or you could add in some, meat, something like that, some chicken, just to make that salad go longer. But part of it is the volume of the ingredients in your salad. If you do a variety, and I always like to make a salad as colorful as possible because you're representing a lot more nutrients in the process.
Oh yeah, that's great. I'm probably the worst about that. I'll eat a salad at a restaurant because I don't have to prepare. And at home, I'm like, there's just a million things to cut up and throw in there. So yeah, kind of bad
So
about
do
that.
multiple salads at one time.
Aha,
Use a
yes.
mason jar. And if you Google mason jar salads, there are lots and lots of recipes, but the idea is to put the heaviest, thickest, like carrots and celery and things like that at the bottom,
Okay.
and then build it up. You can actually make it look really pretty in layers, and then the top is lettuce. But then you can build multiples at one time and just seal them up and put them in the refrigerator and have several days worth of salad that just has to be dumped into a salad bowl to serve it for a meal.
Oh, I love that idea. My husband that would be his version of heaven, to just grab something out of the fridge and go in the
Mhm.
morning versus really having to plan for
Could
it.
work for lunch, having a lunch to take to work as well. Although I found when we were preparing those for my husband to take to work, he found that a quart jar was too much.
Hmm.
He said for an individual meal for lunch, he really needed more of a pint jar instead of a full quart. So you kind of have to play with your portions that way.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, fantastic tip. I love that. Okay, so what kinds of protein sources? Because it sounds like protein would be kind of a cornerstone of the meal. What kinds of protein
Mhm.
sources do you like to recommend to your clients?
I'm not super selective about proteins. And of course, I work with clients that are vegetarian or vegan, and so I will work with options for them versus the person that eats meat. But I like to go more for what I call a clean protein. So it's not loaded with sauces and all kinds of additives. I live in Louisiana where food is king, and there's a fancy sauce for almost any meal. And so I try to go more to the clean side. Let's keep it simpler. I'm not averse to red meat, although I don't recommend it at every meal because it can be hard for some people to digest it well. But a good fish, I always go for wild caught fish because farm raised fish are not fed a natural diet and they do not have omega-3s in them the way we expect to get from fish. So I recommend wild caught fish or chicken, and then occasional red meat. But you can also do a meatless meal once or twice a week and focus more on black beans, chickpeas, things like that to be a protein source.
Okay. So a lot of people, when they're talking about a vegetarian diet and, just kind of bouncing off that you work with vegetarian clients,
Mhm.
a lot of people will look at a vegetarian diet and say, well, where's your protein coming from? But that's
Right.
really kind of not something that people need to be as worried about. Is that correct?
Actually, a vegetarian or vegan have to be very purposeful for their protein because their typical approach is to vegetables or fruit. I've worked with vegetarians who really did more fruit than vegetables, and that had a stress on their liver because the liver has to process the fructose sugar that's in fruit. And so we found there was evidence of some stress on the liver in that way. But a lot of vegetarians get a lot of their calories and energy and bulk from breads and grains, and that may not necessarily be good for them. But they can, you have a lot of variations on vegetarians. Some are pescatarians where they would eat fish, and so they would get some fish for protein on occasion, or they could do the beans. Some would eat eggs, and so you can incorporate eggs, provided that's not one of the food sensitivities you may have. There are ways to get the protein. It's a little more tricky for a vegan because they're not going to use any animal sources. And so then they have to be very purposeful about their beans and their sources. And if they use any soy, which I really don't recommend for most women because it's an estrogen source and it can throw you into estrogen dominance. But I always say if you're going to eat soy, it needs to be organic because soy is a heavily genetically modified crop in America. So they just need to be purposeful in what they're doing to get their protein. Whereas those of us who eat a normal diet, I don't know what you would call, are more commonly getting meat and getting the animal products in.
Okay, so many questions. First, as you were talking, you mentioned that your client had a liver complication with too much fructose. How did you know that?
Reading the lab reports. Because of my functional medicine training, I can look at labs. And whereas a doctor typically in the very short time they have to meet with their clients is just looking, are these lab numbers within the reference range? I'm looking for what's optimal in that reference range. Is it high? Is it low? Is it in that sweet spot? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be normal. I want to be optimal. It works better that way. And so in that, I was looking at the alkaline phosphatase and AST and ALT, which are liver enzyme measurements. And you could see that they were high, not overly so, not clinically high, but high. And that just told me, we're concerned about the liver and the stress on the liver. And people don't realize that fructose has to be processed through the liver, not through your normal digestive system, which is part of why high fructose corn syrup is an issue, as is agave syrup. A lot of people think that they're doing a better thing, making a better choice, choosing agave syrup because it seems like a healthier version. But agave is actually higher in fructose than high fructose corn syrup. So I don't recommend that as a regular sweetening source because it's stressing your liver.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so you had another comment in there about vegetarians using a lot of breads and grains. So what is your opinion of breads and grains just in general?
In general, I'm cautionary about them because so much of our breads and grains are highly processed. I love it when you look at a loaf of Wonder Bread. Whoa, doesn't every child love the fact that you can peel the crust off and make it into a ball?
Right.
Yeah. There's something wrong there. But you look at that and it talks about being fortified with 7 or 8 different nutrients. But you know what? When they processed that grain into flour, they took out 42 nutrients and they put only 7 back. So you really are lacking a lot. You've lost the germ, you've lost the bran that give the nutrients and a lot of the flavor to our foods that are made with flour. So there can be an issue with the loss of nutrients in it. If you're eating a lot of processed bread, you can be getting a lot of brominated effects. There's brominated flours and preservatives that are put in breads, and bromine can kick iodine out of your cell receptors so that you're not getting the iodine you need for thyroid. So if you're eating a lot of bread products, you can actually be throwing your iodine levels off.
Wow,
and
so thyroid, that would be a weight.
We are a whole system. It all works together. It really does. And, whereas your doctor, you go to an EENT and he's looking at specific areas, or you go to your endocrinologist and he's looking at specific things, I look at the whole picture because functional medicine is looking at what are the root causes of these particular symptoms. So I'm looking, if I have someone that has some thyroid issues or appears some thyroid symptoms, I'm going to be looking at what is their diet and how is their diet affecting what their thyroid can do. Whether it's, the conversion of T4 to T3 to be active, or what's your cortisol level and your stress level doing to squelch your thyroid function as well. There's so many things involved, but food is our primary source. That's where we get our nutrition and our fuel for our body. So I always start with fuel. That's really why I wrote the book, was this is the foundational information I teach my clients when I'm working with them. And
so
it's something that everybody needs to know, I feel.
I agree with you. It's so disappointing that the medical community puts so little emphasis on holistic nutrition, just this entire system that we are. And, there's so little education that goes into the medical community about nutrition specifically. And so, how can you possibly treat an entire person when you don't have that knowledge? I often tell people when I'm speaking that your disease or your symptoms is not a lack of medication. It's a lack of the right nutrients. So, and there are doctors out there, we are so blessed to have the triage care that we have. If I'm in an accident, I want to be in an emergency room where I'm getting that triage, emergency care. But for the health care, we're lacking because they don't incorporate nutrition. Yes. There are more doctors that are beginning to see that and see the need. But I really think so much could be started with nutritional choices rather than immediately jumping into a medication. Yeah, and so many of the diseases that we're seeing skyrocket, obesity is just kind of, I don't know if it's a symptom or a cause, but now we're talking about type 2 diabetes being on the rise, and heart disease, and liver failure, fatty liver disease, all of these things, celiac disease, stuff that we didn't really see that much of before, and all of a sudden it's almost like this epidemic. And so then we need to treat it, but the only real way to treat it would be nutritionally. Am I off on that, or is that
exactly correct? There are a lot of our prominent diseases that are really lifestyle and food based, not a breakdown of the body necessarily, and they can be corrected by making changes in lifestyle and your food. Type 2 diabetes can be reversed in many people. Doctors won't tell you that. Doctors will treat it the way they've been trained in the standard of care. But if you do some significant changes to the body or to the diet, and then also support the body nutritionally with what it's been lacking, I have seen type 2 diabetes reverse and no longer be an issue for someone. It can be done. But so many things are, I think a lot of our increased disease level is because of the standard American diet, which those in the nutrition field abbreviate to SAD. Standard American diet is SAD. If you eat based on commercials in the TV, you are not eating food that's fueling your body. You're really breaking yourselves down. And the way our food is produced even, the farming systems are not the same. They're out for massive production instead of growing it in a way that provides the maximum nutritional value to the food that we eat. And so as a result, we've got, celiac is on the rise. I don't know that our genes have changed that much drastically. But the expression of those genes is being turned on by our food supply, because epigenetics is the study of genes and the change in genes. And it was actually based in study of bees, the study of bees. When you look at bees and the harvesting of honey, when bees are in the larval state in the hive, they are all the same. The only thing that changes whether that bee becomes a queen, a worker, or a drone is what they are fed.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
What they are fed. And they have found that it equates to the human body as well. Your lifestyle, the actions in your body, as well as the way you eat, will significantly affect the way your body works and what your longevity is. And it can be turned around if it's gotten into a bad way. It can be turned around, but you have to support it in the right way.
Okay, we are leading to one of my biggest pet peeves, and that is, there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
Eat this, don't eat that. Like eggs were of the devil not too long ago, and now all of a
Yeah.
sudden, eat eggs and be happy about it. I feel like the government and the industry in general
Uh-huh.
would like to tell us what to eat, but they don't really know. And in some cases, I believe that they don't really have our best interests at heart. I don't know that the science is really telling us and really knows what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. Beyond, like obvious stuff, like don't eat trans fat and don't eat high fructose corn syrup and watch your GMOs and eat grass-fed beef. All of these things that we're kind of hearing, but I don't get a sense that they really nailed it, like they really understand what we should be doing. There's a lot of blaming of people, like so-and-so is obese and how could they not control themselves and why aren't they exercising? And, there's just a lot of that, just real blaming of the victim, basically.
Oh, yeah.
But not a whole lot of real solid advice beyond eat the right food, don't eat as much, and exercise. And I'm just, I'm just curious how, like, how are we to combat
What do we do
this?
with that?
Exactly.
Well, first of all, one of the things that I often tell my clients when they have a similar issue with what's giving, I don't understand all this. I often remind them that even the USDA, food pyramid a long time ago, and now it's the My Plate, is a political document. It is in support of all the agriculture that the USDA supports. The reason that processed cakes and candies and all the flour-based foods that really aren't good for you are so inexpensive is because the government subsidizes certain crops. You can spend a lot less on a hamburger in a restaurant than you can on a good salad. And that's because the beef and the bread in the hamburger and even the cheese is subsidized by the government, which lowers the price of the product in general, whereas the salad is not subsidized. So a lot of it is driven by big food and big pharma and the subsidy programs that the government has. The My Plate program, the change to the My Plate was much more beneficial for visualizing how a plate should be balanced, and I incorporate that in my book as well. But I don't use the My Plate version because it's got that glass of milk off to the side for every single meal, and we do not need to drink milk. In fact, many of my clients have done better coming off of dairy, that their bodies just reject that. And if you're having hormone imbalances, milk is a very hormone beverage. The cow was pregnant and is nursing a baby afterwards, technically. And so milk has a lot of hormones to it, and it can throw people out of whack. But really, you need water more than anything. You really need to drink water priority. Our body is vitally requiring water for balance, for organ function and everything. But then you also need to add some fat. And we've been talking, fat-free for the longest time. How many decades have they promoted fat-free products? And where has it gotten us?
Yeah.
If you just sit down and look at a park or look in a restaurant or a store, this fat-free stuff hasn't helped at all. And it's the problem is when they take the fat out, they lose the flavor for food, and they add that in with sugar and chemicals. And so we're adding things in that work against our body as well. But good, solid, nutritional fats, avocado, nuts, or olive oil, coconut oil. The American Heart Association came out a couple weeks ago with a saying that, oh, coconut oil is bad for you. And they actually said you do better eating corn oil and soybean oil. And I thought, you've just taken us back 3 or 4 decades of progress, you know? No! Because corn and soy is the top GMO crops in this nation. And so when you're eating those oils, they're easily rancid. They don't have, you are getting hydrogenated and trans fat products in your body, and that's not good either. So picking your good fats and balancing fat into your body helps your brain, because your brain is, a lot of the building blocks are fat and cholesterol, by the way. We do need cholesterol. It's not a bad thing. And all of your cellular structure, the cell membrane is fat-based. So what happens if you're eating a fat-free diet? You've got grapes or raisins for cells instead of good, flush, brown cells. So they've got things out of whack. And I know it is frustrating when we're told one thing and then 5 years later they say something else and something else. But when I work with my clients, we find what fits their body. Bioindividuality is a basis for how I work. One diet is not going to fit all. A lot of foundational changes will help, but then we need to find out, you know, do you do better with a ketogenic diet that's high protein and fat, or do you do better more on a vegetarian diet? Or, you know, what is the balance that your body functions on the best? And that's part of what I do in coaching and exploring with my clients, and they're the lab. We have to figure out what works in them.
Okay, so now we're at a test group of one, basically, which I love. I mean, you know, it's what we put in our mouth is really very individualized. I do wonder, though, how different are we really, you know, like biologically? And just as a for instance, I've done reasonably well on a low carb diet, and I've done reasonably well on a high fat diet. But I've never tried vegetarian, and I've never tried a low fat diet because I don't believe in them, really. So I wonder, you know, the cookie cutter one size fits all, everybody needs to go low carb. I don't know that that's always a good idea. But really, how different are we as human beings?
There can still be quite a variety. There's I don't know if you've heard the eat right for your type, the blood type diet theories. That was started by Dr. Diadamo up in Canada, and then his son carried it on and actually took it to testing to put some more science behind the theories that his father had founded. And that talks more about if you're a type O, you really need a strong level of protein, whereas a type A is more geared toward vegetarian, but I'm type A, and I don't do well on vegetarian for long. I can do it for periods, but there comes a point where I really seem to need meat. And the type O is said to need meat on a regular basis. And then you get into B and AB, and there's quirks that way. But again, that's one theory. That's one potential. You can test some of those concepts, but it doesn't mean that it's across the board. And yet look at a family. You and your husband and your family members don't all have the same blood type, do you?
Well, we're all O's. I'm O neg, he's O pos. So.
Okay. I know with my oldest son, he and his wife are both A, but his daughter is O. So there's a throwback in there. And if you went with blood type diet in their family, they'd be eating all vegetarian and cooking a slab of meat for the daughter. So, you know, variations that way. But it still comes down to what digests well, what fuels you, and you have to learn to listen to your body and hear what your body is saying. When we eat a meal, typically, we just eat and go. And if we feel drained or we feel tired, or my goodness, an hour after the meal, we're already getting grumbly in our stomach again, we think, oh, okay, I need more. but we're not stopping to think about what I ate for that last meal wasn't working for me. How can I change it? What do I need to adjust in that to know that it satisfies me to go for about 4 hours in between meals? And that's
Okay.
something that each individual has to learn to observe.
Okay, so that's a good benchmark, a 4 hour in between meals
Mm-hmm.
benchmark. Okay, so for me, I do not, and this doesn't all have to be all about me, but
Sure.
since we're talking,
You know you, though.
so for me, I don't feel like when I eat something, I get a real clear directive as to, that was a good thing to eat or that was not a good thing to
Uh-huh.
eat, so I'm wondering, like, if somebody's trying to figure out what they really are compatible with, how much
Mm-hmm.
time should they be thinking, okay, I'm going to try vegetarian for 3 days and see what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a
Okay.
reasonable amount of time, or would it be more like,
It could be. It could be. It's going to take some adjustment over. And of course, if you're switching from eating a standard diet to more of a ketogenic diet, then you're actually switching your body from using glucose as your fuel to fat as your fuel. And
mm-hmm,
generally, when you do that transition, you want to do it for at least a week because those first couple days you're going to be dragging because your
brutal?
body hasn't figured out where to get its food, where to get its nutrient and its fuel. So that takes, it's like flipping a big switch in your body. But when you go from eating a standard diet or a mixed diet with protein and meats and vegetables, and then you go to more of a vegetarian diet, I think you would probably get an idea within about 3 days or so of how is this going. But that doesn't mean you have to commit to it for the rest of your life. I've known many people that for a season in their lives, they were vegetarian and it worked very well. Or maybe they were even vegan and it worked very well. But then there came a point where their body was driving them through cravings and desires and just, I wasn't settled. I wasn't feeling right in my skin. And when they began to introduce a little bit more meat or a little variety of proteins, then they found like they got the right spot again. So I think you can actually have different seasons in your life when different types of foods will satisfy you better.
Very interesting. Okay, so you mentioned ketogenic diets. I think I've heard it a couple of times. Can you explain
Mhm.
to us kind of what that means, what a ketogenic diet is?
That diet is totally focused on using fat for fuel for your body. So to me, I think it's ideal for mostly type O blood types if you're going by the blood type theories. But I have done the ketogenic diet for a month at a time with my husband who wanted it. I didn't want to have to cook two different meals, so I followed along. Um, but the focus is no sugar sources. So there's no sugar, there's no grains, because when you eat grains, it turns into sugar in your body. So no grains, no fruit, and very limited quantities of dairy. Not a lot of options in the dairy area, but primarily vegetables and protein meat sources, which could be from cooked beans or from meat itself. So a lot of people will eat a lot of eggs. Oddly enough, I started the ketogenic diet last fall, and shortly after I started, I actually got a food sensitivity test that I had done, and eggs was one of the top things I was sensitive to. So I had to do the ketogenic diet without eggs, which was a little bit trickier. But but what I found was almonds and avocado and eggs and whey, which I have seen heavily prominent in most of the food sensitivity testing I've done with my clients, is whey, which is the basis of dairy, um, and pineapple of all things, which is a bummer because I love fresh pineapple. So there were foods that I had to completely remove from my diet and work on healing my gut because those were foods I was eating all the time on a regular basis. And you think those are healthy things, those are good for you. But for me, there was some intestinal permeability that was allowing those foods to slide through and then be received by my bloodstream and immune system as foreign invader. And I had to completely remove those foods from my diet while I worked on healing my gut. And then about 4 months afterwards, after the first of the year, I re-challenged those foods. And now I can eat them without a reaction, but I can't eat them daily. I just eat them on occasion. So it wasn't they're permanently, they're forever out of your diet type of thing. It was just an occasional, I realized there was some healing and work I needed to do, and then adjusted from that. But it taught me a lot about food sensitivities to work with my clients as well.
Yeah, gosh, that's interesting. It sounds like it could be a complicated process. I really do. I do appreciate that you've outlined everything in your book, and so that's of course going to be my go-to resource for finding out really what makes my body tick, because I don't know. And I think maybe one more question before we wrap it up. What is the role of food and inflammation in the body, and how can we work to reduce inflammation? So what does inflammation actually result in when we have it?
Inflammation is actually at the base of disease. When they said that years ago, they were saying that cholesterol was the problem, was the cause of heart disease and such. Now they have found it is not cholesterol, it's inflammation that is caused by the foods we're eating, by the trans fats we were consuming, even by having very high blood sugar. When you have a lot of blood sugar in your circulatory system, it makes the insides of your arteries sticky. And that's when cholesterol can stick to it and cause a blockage. So it's not the cholesterol that's a problem. It's the fact that it was the inflammation and the blood sugar levels caused sticky arteries that causes the problems. But inflammation is your body's natural reaction. It's not something that's an enemy. It's when it gets carried away or when it's chronic and low level all the time. When your body is reacting to something, but you're not paying attention or not noticing. And so that reaction stays on consistently or maybe rises. And then you're more likely to have more disease caused. Food can cause that inflammation, but food can also equip your body to stop the inflammation. It's just the choices that you make in those foods that makes the difference.
Okay, absolutely fascinating. All right, so for our viewers today, you do have a freebie for us. It is at pursuewellness4u/fill-your-plate. And so I'll have a link to that information in the show notes. And you can see Kelly, find Kelly at her website, Pursue Wellness for You. And I'd recommend that you go there and sign up for her newsletter. It's fascinating information. Obviously today we talked about kind of the tip of the iceberg with the book. And so, I'm going to Amazon to get that book because I need it. And I recommend all you guys do too, because we can all get healthier and have happier lives because of our better health. So Kelly, thank you again for being with us today. It has been a pleasure, and thanks for answering all my questions. You did such a great job.
I love to talk nutrition. I love to talk health because my heart is to pursue wellness for you, for life. And I finished that with because health is wealth. When you don't have your health, you don't have true wealth. So my passion is to help people discover how good they can feel in their bodies.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.